Hi folks, Sty North here. Haven't done a video in about a week, so the um, look at this thing. Say hi to the camera, Bellatrix. This is my son's cat, and she's crazy as the devil. Oh yes, you are. Oh yeah, not now. No, not now. Okay. Now that she's out of the way. Oh, don't you mess with my tripod. She's a terrible thing, this cat. Oh, she's full of mischief. Um, but that's why I like her. She's a non-conformant. Um, she's going to have her way. And it's kind of fitting with this video. I'm calling this video One for the Ladies. And I'm going to be talking about women in the outdoors. And the reason I'm even doing this video is because I'm seeing more women subscribing to my channel and leaving comments. Wonderful comments. Great questions. I can't help but believe that all of us men out there in the bushcrafting and outdoors world tend to, and I don't think we do intentionally, but we tend to forget to give the ladies out there, our outdoors women, or an outdoorsman's companion that supports everything he does in the outdoors, even though she may not. We don't give these women their due, the credit they are due. And I was talking with an individual the other day that said, "Oh, you don't want to take a woman with you out in the outdoors because all it's going to be is a babysitting job." Well, I took issue with that. I took a big issue with that because my experience over the years has proven otherwise. I have met some women over the years that I would pick as an outdoor adventure companion over any man I've met out there. Now I'm going to discuss a few of these women in this video. I'm going to try to keep it short, but I want to just set some examples of women, and these are not the exception to the rule, because I have met many, many women that fare quite well in the outdoors, and they have very sound bushcrafting and outdoor skills. So this, I don't think for a moment that I'm saying, oh, it's the exception to the rule, but there are some of these exceptional women out there. No, I would say there are many, many exceptional outdoors women out there that, like I said, they don't get the credit they're due, but they also need to get out there, do some videos. Now we have a few on YouTube, and I watch them. I watch these gals that are out there doing it, and but I think we need more women getting out there and bushcrafting and doing some video work on it and showing that this is not, the outdoors is not just a man's world, okay? Now some men may take issue with that. They might say, "Sty, what's the matter with you? You know, you're taking the women's side over the men's side." I'm not taking anybody's side. I'm saying that people are people, and everyone has that ability in them to take part in and become part of the natural world around them. Okay, I'm going to get to these women and the examples that of now these are women that I met in my life, and and if anybody wants to take issue with what I have to say about these women, you're wasting your breath because you won't diminish the greatness of these gals. Not with me, you won't. Some people say, "Oh, well, you're polishing it up, or you're just putting some frosting on the cake to make them look better." No, I'm going to explain to you about these women from my own observation exactly what I saw of these women. And it brings no question. I mean, you can question it all you want, you won't get a response because it is what it is, and it is what I saw. Okay, the first gal. Now, this was out in the first two gals actually, I met out in the northwestern Rocky Mountains. The first gal, a younger gal, she was in her 30s. She was single at the time, and her name was Jill. I had never met her before. Now, I was way up in the backcountry. I had hiked in, and it was about a day and a half hike to a big high mountain lake full of beautiful native cutthroat trout. And I hiked up to that lake, and I come up over this ridge, and you look down to the lake, and I could see somebody had set up a baker's style, if you know what a baker's style tent is. It's a cabin style tent. You use big cross poles with a ridge pole to hang the tent from. Outfitters use them all the time out west. And it was a good sized tent. It was about 14 by 16. And there was a saddle horse and two pack horses. Now, I didn't see who was there at first. And there was a fire in a fire pit out front of that tent going. And I thought, well, I've got company up here. I'll go set camp farther down the lake from them, and so I don't disturb them. But I'll have to introduce myself to them so they know I'm there. Well, then I saw the individual come out of the tent. And he looked like a fairly tall young feller. Big cowboy hat, flannel shirt, had a big handgun strapped to his side, big Bowie knife on the other side. And I thought, well, typical out here, the folks you find that far back in the backcountry are pretty rugged. They're rugged folks. So I hiked down, got to the lake, came up to the camp, and I hailed the camp, let them know I'm there. And all of a sudden I hear a gal's voice say, "Come on into camp." And I thought, well, there must be a gal in the tent. I walked on in, and this feller gets up, had his back to me, gets up, turns around, looks at me, and here it is, this gal I'm talking about, Jill. Well, very attractive woman. I mean, dressed for the purpose. It was my fault for assuming immediately that it must have been a man. And she surely was not a man. And I introduced myself. She introduced herself. And she said, "Have a seat." She says, "You want a cup of coffee?" I said, "Sure." And so I had a tin cup that I hung on the outside of my pack. I grabbed my tin cup, and she poured me a cup of coffee. It was pretty good camp coffee, too. Well, I noticed that she had put up a pole. She had two Y sticks with a ridge pole across it. And from that pole are hanging a half a dozen really nice cutthroat trout. And they're all gutted out and just hanging on the pole. And she goes, "You come in just as I was getting ready to fix my supper." She says, "I'm having an early supper because I didn't have any breakfast or lunch." I said, "Well, you're going to eat pretty good with a half a dozen of those trout." And she asked if I'd like to join her. I said, "Well, sure. Sure, I'm not going to refuse fresh trout." Well, she went to one of her pack animals, and she was still unloading some of the pack. On the one animal, she still had both panniers hanging on the saddle. So she pulls the panniers off, opens one up, comes out with this big, about a 14 to 16 inch cast iron frying pan. She throws that over the fire and she puts a big slab of lard in there for her oil, and she salts and peppers those fish and starts frying them. Well, we sat there and we ate the trout and we were talking, and I asked her, I said, "You come up here trout fishing quite often?" She goes, "No, actually, I'm just up here exploring." And she said, "I decided to set camp here for a couple of days and then explore out from here." And she said, "I decided I wanted fish for supper." She said, "So I found myself a good stick and bought a 12-foot piece of line, and I went out there and I caught myself a half dozen nice trout." Well, that's what I would do. I don't carry a fishing pole. Out there I didn't. I carried line wrapped around my hat and some flies in my hat. Um, and that's when I realized this gal didn't need anybody's help to be up there in the backcountry. She was well armed. She carried a 44 long-barreled Magnum on her hip. Don't mess with her. On the other hip, she carried a huge Bowie knife, basically a heavy bushcraft knife. She had a folding old-timer pocket or folder in a sheath on her right hip by her pistol. She carried a steel for her flint and steel on a lanyard around her neck. And she said, "I always have a piece of flint in my left pocket." And she said, "I have a secondary one down in one of my," because she was wearing like crew style pants, she had a secondary piece of flint in the other pocket. And talking with her, now we didn't even know the term bushcraft at that time. Talking with her, if I talked to her today, she'd be a bushcrafting star, I guarantee it. She'd be huge. She'd be huge. She'd put a lot of our channels to shame. She knew the outdoors. She knew packing, how to run a pack string, like you would not believe. I ran into her on occasion after that, down in town. She drove a big four-wheel drive crew cab pickup truck, and when you'd see her in town, she looked totally different than you saw her in the backcountry. She looked like what some people would call a proper lady. But mind you, in that proper lady was one tough bushcrafter. No doubt. 2 thumbs up to Jill. She'll stay in my memories for the rest of my life. The next one. Her name was Edna. Now this is going to catch you off guard. She was 72 years old. She had 3 sons in their 30s. No, my crazy cat. Well, actually, they were in their late 30s. One was like 42. And now, she owned a guide service, and they ran hunting, guided hunting trips up in the backcountry for elk, mountain lion, and black bear. And on occasion, they'd go up for mountain goat and mountain sheep on permitted hunts. Well, now Edna, being in her early 70s, owning this big outfitting company, her husband started the outfitting company when they were very young, so they had the company for a little over 40 years. And then they had children. She was in her 30s, if I recall, when she had her children. So she's got these three adult boys that are responsible for taking the hunters out on these guided trips. She ran the business. Well, she was another one. She come to town and she's wearing blue jeans, a flannel shirt, and a cowboy hat, sidearm on her hip, and a nice knife on the other hip. And you didn't give Edna any lip. That woman was in charge. There's no doubt about it. She's the kind of woman where just what she was wearing, with her sidearm and her knife and whatever she had in her pockets, you could drop her in the middle of the mountains anywhere in the Northwest, and she could come walking out of there 6 months later looking no different than she did the day you dropped her off. One day I was in a local restaurant and her three boys were sitting there eating lunch, and I was sitting at the counter having a cup of coffee and a piece of pie. Well, all of a sudden here comes Edna walking in the restaurant. She walks over and goes to the oldest son of hers, and she took him by the ear and twisted, and he's going, "Ma, what are you doing?" And she goes, you guys have a lost hunter and you're sitting in here eating cheeseburgers." And he said, "Well, we gotta eat, and he's not going anywhere, he's lost." She said, "You don't leave the woods till you find your hunter." So here what had happened is they had lost a hunter that morning. They didn't know where he was. He's up there wandering around. They couldn't find him. And the three boys said, "Well, we need to take a break from looking for him. We're going to go have some lunch and we'll go back up and keep looking." Edna didn't care for that business. She told those three boys, "You stay here, finish your cheeseburgers." And she said, "And all three of you can plan on not getting paid for this hunt." And she stormed out of the place. Well, it was about an hour later. I was just coming out of the post office, and here comes Edna pulling in with her pickup truck with this fella. And her three boys come out of that restaurant. They had just got out of the restaurant. They got out, and I stood there and listened. And she told the boys, "Here's your hunter." And they said, "Oh, where'd you find him?" And she told them where she found him. And she said, "And he gets a free hunt, so you guys don't get paid today. You don't get paid for this hunt, period." And she said, "In fact, you're all going home. I'm taking him up, and we're going to finish his hunt." That was a 5-day hunt. That 2 days into the hunt, he got lost. On the 5th day, she come off that mountain with that guy, and he had a huge bull elk in the back of her truck. She took him up there and successfully got him a trophy bull elk. Now, that woman was tough. Tough, hard as nails, just as an outdoor savvy as you can get. I don't think I've ever seen one as outdoor savvy as her other than Jill. There's two great women that I've met over the years that really never got the credit they were due. Now I got one more to talk about, and that's going to be real quick. I met a gal in northern Minnesota. She lived way off the beaten path in a log cabin. Just happened across her, got to talking to her, and basically all she did was write poetry. And she said she's been living in that cabin since she was 21 years old. Her and her husband built the cabin. There were no roads to it. You had to come across it by chance, hiking. There was a good trail off the road that went to it. But this woman didn't own a car. She used sled dogs to get in and out in the winter. She had 5 dogs, and she was the closest to living off the land that I've actually met, where a person's living in an actual home, in a sense, in their log house, their log cabin. It was quite a nice log cabin, actually. Totally off the grid. There's no power at all, no electricity at all. She had no internet access, television, none of that. She did have AM/FM radio that battery operated, and she would buy batteries every 3 months to keep her radio going so she could hear what's going on in the outside world. And she came out of her cabin once a month and got supplies, and she did it by backpack. So she'd go to town with an empty backpack on foot. Sometimes people would see her and pick her up and bring her to town. She'd load that backpack up with flour and sugar and coffee and all of the things that she couldn't get off the land. And she'd pack that stuff back home for the month, and then she'd head back down again. In the winter, she said she'd come out every 2 months because of the risk of traveling in the winter. Here's the kicker. Her husband died when he was 35 years old. She was 30 at the time. She was 76 years old when I met her, and still living in that cabin, alone. Running a trap line. She's running 60 traps on she had 3 trap lines, a total of 60 traps. She fished and preserved fish, and she hunted and preserved the meat. She was doing it all on her own. On her own. She had actually raised 2 children at that cabin, and they were adults, moved away. She homeschooled them, home taught them. She had a very good education when she married her husband, and she was able to homeschool those kids, and she sent them out for public school, and they lived with an aunt and uncle for a while they finished their high school. And all I can say about that gal is she lived it. The other 2 gals I talked about, they did it. They went out and did it. But they lived on the grid. They had homes with electricity and all of the niceties. But they could step off the grid and go out there, and they did it. This gal, she didn't go out there and do it. She lived it. She was living it. So when you think about my Live or Die Off the Land series, there's a gal, I'll probably bring her up in that series, that, as I said, she was the closest established individual that I've ever met that was, for the most part, living strictly off the land. I think I will talk about her in that series. So there you go. Now, 2 of these women I talked about were in their 70s. The one I talked about was in her 30s, early 30s. Three very exceptional women. They were exceptional for women. They were exceptional for as far as men go. They were exceptional as far as the outdoors world goes. But those are only three. I've met so many more. I've met through hikers on trails that were hiking 6, 8, 1,200 miles. I met a gal that was 71 years old that was riding her bicycle from Seattle, Washington to Portland, Portland, Maine. And I thought she was nuts. Oh, but she was hard as iron. She's just a tough gal. And she was doing it all by stealth camping along the trip. She was not staying in motels. She was not taking the easy way out. I've met gals in wilderness settings where I thought I wouldn't find anybody else, and there'd be one or two gals hiking through the woods or hiking through the backcountry. No man with them. So I want everybody to stop for a moment and just think about women that you know in your life that deserve the credit for being able to go out there and do what you do, what we do, or even just support somebody, a companion, a friend that's doing just that, going out there and bushcrafting and being in the outdoors and doing some wilderness adventures, and the woman in the background that's supporting that individual and giving them that moral support and that emotional backing to get out there and do what you need to do, what's good for you and your soul. Get out there and do it. To have a woman support you to go out there can make it a lot easier for some folks, men and women. Women are just good at being more nurturing and supportive. We all know that. So that's Stye's little 2 thumbs up to the women out there in our bushcraft world. And ladies, think highly of yourselves. Get out there, make some videos. Get a channel going. Show some of us old bushcrafters a thing or two. I'd enjoy it. I think everybody would enjoy it. Well, until later, this is Stye saying, for a very short video, this sure took a long time. And you all have a nice day. Bye-bye.